Hi, my name's Noemia Schelling. I'm just going to share a little bit of my story with you today, how I got saved, and a couple of things I've learned over the last few years. Um, so, I grew up in a Christian home. I was practically born into the nursery. My parents both love the Lord and raised me in church my whole life, every Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. I was very involved with my youth group and with serving in the church. I helped out at VBSs and anything I could, really. Played the piano a little bit in my church when I was older. And then I went to college, Christian college in Tennessee, which is where I met Andy. And but my second year that I was there, I attended an open air meeting type thing, and while the preacher was preaching, I just felt this real heaviness, like I wasn't saved. But how could that be? Because I grew up in a Christian home. I went to church my whole life. I served in the church. And so I have to be saved. I remember the story. Um, but the whole bus ride home to my dorm, I was so, I was not smiling or happy. My roommate thought there was something wrong with me. And so I went and talked to my dorm supervisor, and I just blurted out everything, and I'm like, I need to get saved. I don't remember when I got saved. And what I was doing was I was using a story from a cousin of mine that had come to church with me one Sunday, and she wanted to get saved, and I remembered walking out with her and her getting saved. And somewhere along the line, because I was young, that story became mine. And I didn't remember that being her. I remembered it being me, even though it wasn't. And so I prayed and got saved in my dorm room at college in September 3rd in 2001. And Andy and I were married in 2003, went back to Kentucky to work in his mom and dad's church. And so there is where I learned one of my first lessons, and that is that it's all about God. It's not about me. It's not about me serving or what I'm doing for God. It's about me and my relationship. It's about God and my relationship with Him. And we served there for 11 years. We were very involved. I did a lot of planning, a lot of VBS stuff. We worked in youth group for all that time, and I was just very comfortable with where we were. We were with his family, so even though we had left mine, we were still with family. And toward the end of those 11 years, God was beginning to speak to Andy about moving and going somewhere else. And that was really hard for me. I did not want to leave. I was a little bit angry even, just that, why would you move us, God? Like, we're here, we're serving, we're doing good, everything is great, everything is fine. But he ended up moving us. And I just remember feeling that first few months that we were away that I was so lonely, and I went from being in a church where I was very involved, preacher's daughter-in-law, gave him his first grandbaby, and just friends for 11 years, and just very involved in everything at church, to this other church now where I wasn't anything, just Andy's wife and my kid's mom. And it was really hard for me, and I was very, very lonely. I felt like I had kind of lost my identity a little bit, because who was I now? I'm not playing the piano. I'm not serving anywhere. I'm not helping plan anything. I'm just here. I'm just being. And, but it was in that time that I learned that I had to be okay with it just being me and God and my family. If that's all it was ever going to be, I had to learn to be okay with that. And I had to learn that it was not about how much I was serving or how much I was doing. I had been neglecting my relationship with God in order to serve God, which seems kind of like they're both good, but I was neglecting the one and doing the other. And so I lost who I really was, which was God's child. And that relationship was more important than me doing things for Him. And and so that was one of my biggest lessons, was learning that it was all about God, and I didn't have to be serving Him to be important, or to be, and I didn't need to be important. That was another thing that was hard for me, is I was important. I was the preacher's daughter-in-law. I had a lot of responsibility and some power, and so it was hard for me to go somewhere where I wasn't that anymore. Um, but God brought me out of my loneliness, and I was able to be okay with it just being me and God. And um, and now I don't have to be in a position to serve. I don't have to be important, because I'm important to God, and that's all that matters. And my relationship with Him is important, and that I teach my kids to have a relationship with Him, and that's important. Um, and so that was my first pretty big lesson that I learned. The second one was about true forgiveness, and that one was a little bit harder, I think, even to learn than the first one. But I grew up in church, but I did not grow up in ministry. I wasn't a preacher's daughter or anything like that. So I knew how important church was, but I didn't really realize until I was in ministry how hard it was. And, when you're in ministry, you see a lot of people come, a lot of people go. And one of the hardest things for me was that, we had been through a couple of church splits, but there was one that, in a couple of different places, that I thought, these people were my friends. And it was hard for me. The first place we were at, they were more like family. When I needed a mom hug, that's who I would go to. And so when they left and were upset with our family, my husband's family, and just different things like that, that hurt a lot. And, I thought, I can't leave. When you're in the ministry, you can't leave. You live through it all, and you have to learn how to get through it. And one of the other hardest things for me was that people that were my friends were, still talking about this family and still communicating with them, and they were even friends with my parents, which was hard. And I was angry at them, very angry. And for a long time, even with our first move away from there, um, it took me a couple of years before I was able to forgive them. If I saw them in Walmart, I would walk the other way. I didn't want to hear anybody else talk about them. I would leave the room. If I heard their name, I just got this cringy kind of feeling, and I knew it was wrong, but I was just having a really hard time with forgiveness. And when we first made a move away, I was part of a small group doing a study on one-way love, the book, and it's all about how God loves me one way, even when I am not lovable, or when I don't love Him as much as I should, or like I should, or show Him like I should. He still loves me, and He loves them too, even when they're not being lovable and they're not showing Him love, or for anybody really. God loves us one way, and we're supposed to try to be like Him. And I was really, really struggling with how I felt about this family, and I didn't want to do it, so I started where everybody has to start. Every day, just forgiving every day. Help me to forgive them today and get through today. And I don't know when it happened, but God brought me to a point where I finally don't have any of those resenting feelings toward them anymore. And God helped me. It took a couple of years, but God helped me to get completely over it, to where I did not feel that way anymore, and I was able to truly forgive them. And the part I wanted to, one of the verses that helped me was this one. It's in Psalm 55 and verse 12 through 14. And it says, "For it was not an enemy that reproached me, then I could have borne it. Neither was it he that hated me that did magnify himself against me. Then I would have hid myself from him. But it was thou, a man mine equal, my companion and my familiar friend. We took sweet counsel together. We walked in the house of God with the throng." And to me, that was, this is it. This is me. This is my situation. You were my friend. And, God just was able to bring me to a point where, you know, to me, this is what it was. And then the other verse that he gave me was in Psalm 27, verse 13, that says, I had fainted unless I had believed to see the goodness of Jehovah in the land of the living. And that's kind of where I was at. I was just done. And and I wanted to be at the point where I'm like, you know what, forget it. I'm leaving. I'm done. And I'm like, I can't do that. And this verse spoke to me because it said I had fainted, or, I was about to give up. But I saw the goodness of God, of Jehovah in the land of the living. We can't run from the things that God puts us through. And to kind of sum up all of this, God lets us go through good times, fun times, hard times, sad times, scary times, and no matter what time that we're going through, it's always for a reason, and He has a plan for it. And He puts us through those things so that He can mold us and make us more like Jesus, and to help us to see His heart. I had to learn to see that family through God's eyes, not through my own. And while He brought me through that hard time so that I could learn something, He probably brought them through it for the same reason, to teach them something too. And so that has helped me to be able to forgive more truly, in just knowing that God is putting all of us through whatever we go through, good or bad, so that He can make us to be more like Him. And I just hope that my story will help somebody else out there today.